refuah shlema for her daughter Ilana Bas Esther. Okay, today's daf is daf Chaf. We're going to pick up on Yud Tes Amud Beis, 7 lines from the bottom, at the beginning of the line. So the Gemara. So we were talking about when the Mishnah referred to the oref. The Gemara is dealt that it's not the oref itself, which is the back of the head, but rather it's the area that is opposite the back of the head, which is the neck. Now the Gemara wants to know, how do we actually know? In other words, we see that the oref refers to mimul oref, but how do we know that that refers to the back of the neck? So the Gemara says the Tanur Rabbanan, because we learned as follows: mimul arpo, when it says in the pasuk that you should do Malika mul the oref. So it says mul means mul haroa es haoref. That the word mul means to see something. So when it says mimul ha'oref, it's saying that from the area from which you see the oref being the back of the head. Now we're going to see how you see it means from where you see, and also how you see means the back of the head. Says the Gemara, v'cheinu omer, and so it says v'hu yoshev mimuli. So this is a reference to the story with Balak and Bilam. So he basically said that Klal Yisrael, it says vayishlach malachim el Bilam ben Bar Pesora asher al anar it's b'nei amo likro lo, to call to Bilam saying Lamar hine am yatzu min Mitzrayim, the nation came out of Mitzrayim, hine kisas ein aretz, that is covering the land, v'hu yoshev mimuli, it's sitting mimuli. So Rashi seems to imply mimuli could either mean on top of, but that doesn't make sense because he wasn't on top of Balak, but rather he was within sight of Balak. So Balak saw out from his country and saw that Klal Yisrael was there. So you see that Yoshev Mimuli means that Klal Yisrael was sitting within sight of Balak. So that's how we see that Mimuli means that which you could see. Continues the Gemara, V'omer in a second pasuk, Ki panu elai oref v'lo panim. That this is v'lo panim. That this is a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, and it says that Klal Yisrael has turned its oref to me and not its face. So the Gemara says, "My Vomer, what are you adding with the second pasuk?" He says, "V'chitem," and if you're going to say oref gufi lo yadana hecha denoda mul didei hecha, because maybe you'll tell me, okay, fine, you've demonstrated to me that mimul means within sight of, but in other words, when it says within sight of the oref, how do I know that oref is a reference to the back of the head? So tashma, because the pasuk says, "Ki panu elai oref v'lo panim," that when the pasuk says that they've turned to me the oref and not the face, michlal the oref lahade panim, that tells you that the oref is that which is opposite the face. So, as Rashi points out, that if it wanted to tell you that the oref is the back of the neck, it would say mimul the tzavar, from the throat. But rather, it says that. So I'm sorry. It would say that they've turned to me their oref and not their throat. So rather, the fact that it contrasts oref with the face is a reference that oref is the back of the head, and therefore mimul oref is that which is in sight of the back of the head, which is really the neck, because when you have an animal, the back of the head is opposite the neck. So we've generally translated mimul to mean opposite, but it's not technically what it means. It technically means within sight of the oref, which is the neck, and that's the area where you would do Malika. Okay, new thing, 4 lines up from the bottom. Amri b'nei Reb Chia, mitzvahs Malika machzir simonim lachorei oref u'molech. They says the mitzvah Malika. Now we know obviously Malika, we're talking about the service that was done in the Beis Hamikdash for birds in place of shchita, that when you're dealing with kachim. So he's saying here that the b'nei Reb Chia say that the mitzvah is to turn the simanim. The simanim obviously is a reference to the trachea and the esophagus, to turn them around to the back of the neck. So basically, to take the simanim and turn them to the back of the neck. What would that do? Because then, when you're shechting from the back, which is where you do Malika, what you're going through first is you're first cutting the esophagus and the trachea, and only later only beyond that point would be the neck itself. So he's saying that the mitzvah, when you do Malika, is to put the simanim to the back of the oref and to do Malika at that point. So now, the Gemara says there's 2 different ways of understanding this. Ikadami, there are those that learned af machzar, that Malika, the way we've traditionally understood it, and in fact the Gemara is going to conclude, is that Malika is you take the bird through the back of the neck, you do Malika, which cuts through first the neck, and then it cuts through the trachea and the esophagus. That's how we typically understood it. Now we're adding this idea of putting the simanim around the front. So the idea when we put the simanim around the front is that we're saying not only can you do it the regular way, where you first go through the neck and then the trachea and the esophagus, but you could even do it in a way where you go through the trachea and the esophagus first, and then the neck would be behind it. The Ikka de Army, there are others who say that no, machzir davka. They said no, what they're doing here, B'nai Reb Chia, when it says the mitzvah is to turn the simanim around to the back, is not coming to tell you that's also a possibility. That's coming to tell you this is what Malika is. Malika means you turn the simanim around to the back of the neck, then you do Malika, so you're going through the trachea and the esophagus before you're breaking the neck. So the Gemara says, basically from Raya from our Mishnah, Umistabra, it makes sense, Kamandamar Af Machzer, that it is an additional option. You could do Malika the traditional way, or you could put the simanim around the back. Why? Mimai, how do I know that? Midiktani, from that which we learned in our Mishnah. Hashochet min ha'oref, shchitaso psula. That it says if someone does shchita at the oref, that the shchita is puzzle. So Molech, and we always understood that. Why is shchita from the oref puzzle? Because what you're doing is first you're breaking the neck of the bird, or first you're breaking the neck of the animal, and only then are you getting to the kana and the veshet. So at a minimum, it's going to be a treifa, maybe even nevela. So that's why shchita doesn't work that way. Hamolek min ha'oref malikaso ksheira. But if you do malika from the oref, the malika is kasher. So what do you see? You see that cutting by the oref, cutting by the back of the neck, is something that works only for malika, but not for shchita. So therefore, we say as follows: top of daf chaf, v'isal kadaitach machzir davka. And if you're coming to tell me that the definition of Malika, not an additional option, but the definition of Malika is that you turn the trachea and the esophagus around to the back of the neck, so that's what gets cut first, then my iri Molech, afilu shochet nami. So if that's really the definition of Malika, why can only Malika be done from the back of the neck? Even shchita should be able to be done from the back of the neck, because the first thing you're cutting, if you turn the trachea and esophagus around the back, is the trachea and the esophagus, and therefore that should be sufficient for shchita. So elalav. So rather, when elalav shmamino af machzir umasnisim below ahadir. So he says. So rather, when the Bnei Reb Chia said that you turn the trachea and the esophagus around to the back, that's not defining Malika, because if that was the definition of Malika, or if that was the only thing you could do at the back of the neck, then you would be able to do shchita there also. But rather, Bnei Reb Chia is coming to tell you, you could do Malika the regular way, where you cut through the neck and then the trachea and esophagus, or you could turn the trachea and esophagus around to the back, where you go through that and you don't necessarily even need to cut the neck. So they're coming to tell you one halacha. Now, our Mishnah, which says that you can do Malika from the back and not shchita, is referring not to the case where you turn the simanim, because then you could do even shchita, but it's referring to a case where you did not turn the simanim to the back. If you did not turn the simanim to the back, then you're in fact breaking the neck before you get to the trachea and esophagus, and that would be problematic. So that's why our Mishnah says that you cannot do shchita from the oref, you can only do malika, because it's talking about breaking the neck first. If in fact you were to take the simanim around the back, then presumably you could do even shchita from the back. Okay, so Amreb Yanai. So we now determined what Bnei Reb Chia were saying, but now the Gemara is going to question whether their halacha is right. So Bnei Reb Chia said you could turn the simanim around the back. Reb Yanai said as follows: Yikablu harovin es chuvasan. That the rovin, Rashi translates as hana'arim Bnei Reb Chia. That a rova is a reference to a young person, a nar. Which is interesting. That's the same lashon you have of the kruvim, is like ruvia. So when we say kruvim, a reference, you see like these young angelic figures that were on top of the aron. That's the same lashon of ravia. There's also a reference to it referring, the Mishnah in Tamid talks about the young kohanim who are less than 13 years old. So it's a reference to young people. Others understand that ruvia they would not be calling the Bnei, they would not be calling the Bnei Reb Chia, would not be calling them, young men. So rather, it's a reference that comes from Rovek Kashas, that it's like a chacham who sends forth arrows. So the idea is harovin or chachamim. But in any event, So they was going to say that they should retract what they said. Why? And they said basically that it's enough that you can turn the simanim to the back. He says maybe you can't the katani because we learned as follows: Nimtza kasher b'shchita pasal b'malika, kasher b'malika pasal b'shchita. So we said that which. So in other words, we had the halachas which in the Mishnah told us where you can shech, that Malika is in the back and Shchita is in the front. So it then gave a catch-all statement, which is coming to add something. It said, we discover that which is kasher and Shchita is possible by Malika, and that which is kasher by Malika is possible by Shchita. So Lumite Mai, what is that halacha coming to cover? What is it coming to tell us? So Lav Lumite Machzer Simanim Lachorei Oref. So we might assume that what that's coming to tell you is something that's kasher by shchita is asur by malika. So what's kasher by shchita? Shchita would be where you cut the kind of a veshet first, that you cut the trachea and esophagus first. So you would understand that which is kasher by shchita, which is cutting the kind of veshet first, is pasul by malika, and therefore malika you could not have a scenario of Malika where you cut the trachea and esophagus first before the neck. So therefore, you would not be able to take the simanim around the back and do Malika at that point. So basically, what Rabbi Yanai was saying is that the Bnei Rabbi Chia were mistaken because we learn from those extra words that says that which is kasher shchita is also with Malika would mean that by Malika you cannot cut the kind of a veshet before you go through the back of the neck of the bird. So he says, so of the low. Isn't that coming to tell you they can't do what Bnei Rabbi Chia said? Lo. He says you don't have to understand that, again, the reference was that which is kasher and shchita is possible by Malika, that which is possible by Malika is kasher by shchita. So according to the first teretz where we thought it was saying you cannot put the simanim around the back, what it was coming to say is that which is kasher by shchita, which is to first cut the trachea and the esophagus, is pasul by Malika. Now, and then therefore, the way Rashi explains, the second part was just coming along following that when we said that which is kasher by Malika is pasul by shchita. Now we're coming to say, no, Rabbi Bar Chana says no, really the emphasis is on the second part, which is saying that which is kasher by Malika is pasul by shchita. What would that be? That it was coming to say that even though, and I don't want to get into Shane is kind of a carry along, even though by Malika you can use tziporen, you can use, not only can you do use the fingernail of the Kohen. So that which is kosher by Malika, to use a fingernail, would be pasul by shchita. So those extra words that says that which is pasul by that which is kosher by Malika is pasul by shchita is talking about a fingernail. It's not talking at all about turning the kana and veshet behind the neck. So it's not a problem for the Bnei Rabbi Chia. But the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's what the Mishnah was coming to tell you, those extra words that says that which is kosher by Malika is pasul by shchita is talking about that you can't use your fingernail. Shemet ziporim behedya katani lu. But we learned it on Daf Tesvav on Beis. We learned the Mishnah that said expressly that you cannot use, as Rashi points out, chutz mimagel katzir v'megera v'shinayim atziporan. We went through all those things. Two of the things we said were you can't use teeth that are in an animal, and you can't use a fingernail. So if that can't be what the Mishnah is coming to tell us when it says that which is kosher by Malika is pasul by shchita, because we already learned that expressly in the Mishnah. So Elam Rabbi Yirmiyah says, fine, I'll tell you something else that's coming to include. L'miute Molech umevi. So he says, now we're going back, Rashi explains, we're going back to emphasis on the first part, where it said, that which is kosher by shchita is pasul by Malika, is a reference to being Molech and maybe. So as we've discussed a number of times in Chullin, that the way you do shchita, you can't just push down the knife and slice through the neck of the animal, because that would be darsa, right? That would be putting pressure. So rather, what do? You have to go a back and forth motion. So what we're saying is as follows, that when it says that which is mutter, that which is kosher by shchita, is pasul by Malika, is coming to tell you that by Malika you can't go back and forth, you have to go one slice and be done with it. So the Gemara is, and that's what it was coming to say. That which is kosher by shchita is possible by Malika is talking about Molech maybe. So the Gemara says, well, wait a second. Hani cholaman damar Molech maybe Malika pasul. He says that works well if in fact you hold that going back and forth by Malika is a problem, because then you're saying that that which is kosher by shchita going back and forth is possible by Malika. But Elo mandamar kosher, but according to the mandamar who says it's kosher, which Rashi says is a reference to Machlokas we're going to have on Amud Beis. So he says that which, but according to the mandamar who says by Malika also you could do Molech Umevi, that you can go back and forth. So then what is this extra phrase in the Mishnah come to tell us? That which is kosher by shchita is possible by Malika can't be referring to Molech Umevi. Ma'ikla Meimer, what are you going to say? So the Gemara says, B'nei Rabbi Chia Savri La Kamandamar Molech Umevi Malika Pasal. He says this is not a problem, because this answer that we gave that said that when it's the Mishnah added that which is kosher by shchita is possible by Malika is referring to Molech Umevi, that by shchita you can go back and forth, but by Malika you can't. So even though there is another Manda Amar who says that Molech Umevi is kosher by Malika, this entire thing where we're trying to answer this aspect of the Mishnah is only according to the Bnei Rabbi Chia, and we're going to say that the Bnei Rabbi Chia would be of the opinion that Molech Umevi is possible by Malika, and therefore that catch-all phrase at the end of the Mishnah that said that which is kosher by shchita, i.e. Molech Umevi, to go back and forth, is possible by Malika, and therefore this catch-all phrase is not a question on Bnei Rabbi Chia, because you'll say it's talking about Molech Umevi, it's not talking about whether you can move the simanim, the trachea and the esophagus, behind the neck part. Okay, so although as Rashi referenced, the primary machlokas, which we'll see between Rav Hoonah and Rava, is on Amud Beis about whether Molech Umevi going back and forth works by Malika. We're going to see a little bit of that now. Rav Kahana says, Mitzvahs Malika kotzetz v'yored, v'zu hi mitzvasa. So Rav Kahana says as follows, the mitzvah of Malika, kotzetz, is to cut or to puncture v'yored, and you go right in. So he's basically saying when you do Malika, you take the fingernail, you go right into the neck. None of this back and forth stuff. V'zu hi mitzvasa, that's the mitzvah of Malika. So Sava Rabbi Avin Lameimar. So Rabbi Avin wanted to understand from this statement of Rav Kahana that how do you do Malika? Kotzetz v'yored in Molech Umevi lo. That when he's coming to say you go right in, is coming to tell you that by Malika there's none of this back and forth motion. Rather, you go straight in. And if you were to go back and forth, that would not be proper Malika. Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah said, no, I disagree. Kol sheken de Molech Umevi b'Malika kasher. He says not only can you, in other words, if you can go straight in by Malika, you can for sure go Melech Umevi, back and forth. Why? Rashi explains, because basically Malika is, we would understand, to be a form of shchita, right? It's a little different. So there's halachas that are different. For example, that you use the fingernail, etc. There are different halachas, but it only differs where the Torah expressly told us it differs. So for example, the Torah said, don't use a sakin, use the fingernail. But anything that you could make Malika be similar to shchita, you would want to. So since, even though it's true that by Malika you could go straight, which you cannot do by shchita, so that's a permit. But if you wanted to do Molech Umevi, to go back and forth just like you do by shchita, for sure you should be able to do that, because if the Torah didn't tell you that this aspect of Malika is different than shchita, you would want it to be just like shchita. So Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying, it's true, I have a permit to go straight in, but I also, if I want, can do it the same way I do shchita, which would be this back and forth motion. So now the Gemara says, okay, well, if you're saying that not only can you go straight in, you can also go back and forth. My zuhi mitzvasa. So what's the end of Rav Kahana's statement? Rav Kahana said you could go straight in, and this is its mitzvah. It implies this is the way you do it. You go straight in, you don't go back and forth. So ema af zuhi mitzvasa. Say even this is its mitzvah, meaning even a direct puncture, which is a departure from shchita, is part of the mitzvah of Malika. But for sure, you could also do it back and forth, just like you can by shchita, because Malika is like shchita in all aspects, unless the Torah has defined differently. Okay, we're at the two dots on Chaf Aleph. Reb Yirmiyah, Shmuel. Kol hakasher b'shchita kinegdo ba'oref kasher. I'm sorry. Kol kasher b'shchita, that anything that's kasher in shchita, kinegdo, opposite ba'oref, in the back of the neck, kasher b'malika is kasher malika. So now, as Rashi points out, Shmuel cannot be telling us that it's coming to tell you the halachas of shchita and malika, because if you say everything that's kasher by shchita is kasher by malika, that's not true, because there's differences in halacha. For example, a knife, for example, whether you could go straight in. So it can't be telling us halachas of the shchita. So it must be discussing where on the neck it is kasher. So therefore, we'll be saying that which is kasher in shchita, that area that is kasher by the neck by shchita, then opposite on the back of the neck would be kasher by malika. Now, that itself is also, as Rashi points out, not important for Shmuel to tell us, because Rabbi Yirmiyah name is Shmuel, because we've seen that in the Mishnah. It tells you that the area of malika is the area that's opposite the neck. So rather, it must be coming to tell you the inverse. Ha-pasel b'shchita, pasel b'malika. So it's coming that when Rabbi Yirmiyah says in the name of Shmuel, it's coming to tell you that something that is pasel in the case of shchita is pasel in malika. Because he's saying that which is kosher by the area of shchita is kosher by the area of malika. So that which is pasel by the area of shchita is going to be pasel by the area of malika. Lumute mai. So what case is that coming to tell you that says something that's pasel by shchita is also pasel by malika? So the Gemara says, Ilema lumute ikor simanim. So maybe you're coming to tell me that it's coming to talk about ikor. Now, I referenced to you a couple of weeks ago, I was actually referencing this Gemara when we defined what ikor means. Ikor is one of the five psulim in shchita. And the idea of ikor was this idea of, like, for example, if you have a nick in the knife, that it's tearing the trachea and esophagus as opposed to cutting it. That was a problem. But here, we're not talking, as we just said, we're not talking about the aspects of the action of shchita. So what are we referring to? Ikor, I told you, could also be that if the trachea or the esophagus got disconnected from the mouth, from the jaw of the animal. So the idea would be that even though that's not per se a treifa, it is a psul in that even though it's not a treifa, it's a psul in shchita, and therefore we're going to say as follows: that just like by shchita of an animal, if the pipes are disconnected from the jaw, that is a problem in shchita. So we're going to say maybe that's what the reference is. Tells you that which is pasal by shchita is also pasal by malika, and therefore, if you are coming to do malika to a bird, and the bird's kana or veshet is disconnected from the jaw, that would be a problem in the malika. But the Gemara says, I have a problem with that. V'hatani Rami bar Yecheskel, but we learned in the name of Rami bar Yecheskel, ein ikor simanim ba'of. The way the Gemara is understanding this now is that Rami bar Yecheskel is coming to tell you that the whole concept of ikor does not exist by a bird. So if it doesn't exist by a bird, even by shchita, then for sure it's not going to exist by malika. So it can't be coming to tell you that. So I'm Rav Papa. Okay, so what is it coming to tell you that says something that's pasal by shchita is also pasal by malika? L'miute rosho. That to say that you can't cut by the head. In other words, you can't do malika by the head, just like you can't do malika, just like you can't do shchita by the head. You have to do it by the neck. So the Gemara says, Rosho, you're coming to tell me you can't cut the head of the bird? Pshita, that's obvious. Mimul arpo amrachmana. The Gemara says, the Torah says that within view of the back of the head, which is the neck, and that's obviously not the head itself. So why would I need him to tell me that just like by shchita, you can't cut the head, you can't do it by malika either? So it says, amrachmana v'lo barosho. So the Gemara says, no, what did I mean when I said that it was coming to tell you that you can't do malika by the rosho? My rosho, shipui rosho. It was coming to tell me that I can't do malika by the part, the slant of the head. So the head starts to slant down into the neck. So it's coming to tell you I can't do it there. Now, obviously, that you don't need to tell me either, because the slant of the head is part of the head. But what's it coming to tell you? Which is, we're going to go back and visit things we learned in the last few days. Kigon denokat mishipui rosho v'higrim v'azal adamata tasoi. So he says as follows, that if he starts at the slant of the back of the head, and he's doing Malika, and he goes through the back of the head, but then the majority of the cut of the trachea and esophagus happens within the area that's already within the neck. So he starts almost at the neck and goes down through the neck. So it's coming to tell you that just like by shchita, that's not good, so too by Malika, it's not good if part of the initial cut, in other words, and this is going like who? Like Rav Hoonah Amar Rav Basi, which we said also in the name of others. The Amar Hoonah Amar Rav Basi, Higrim Shlish, V'shachat Shnei Shlish Psula. That according to him, by an animal, if you were coming Higrim on a diagonal, and you cut a third beyond the area that's appropriate for shchita, and then you completed the latter 2/3 of the shchita in the proper area, it's still puzzle. According to this opinion, why? Because you need from the start of the shchita through 50.1% needs to be in the proper area. So therefore, it doesn't work by an animal. So that's what it's coming to tell us. That when it says that which is a problem by shchita is a problem by Malika, is saying just like by shchita, you can't start outside of the proper area and finish the last 2/3 within the proper area. So too with Malika, you can't start at the slant of the head, which is an improper area, and then come down with the fingernail through the proper area, because that would be invalid Malika, just like it is invalid shchita. Okay. Okay, so we're saying as follows. We just said the halacha Rami Bar Yecheskel. Rami Bar Yecheskel said this idea that the disconnection from the jaw is a psul, is a problem in shchita, and that he said it does not apply by an oath. That must be going according to the mandamar. We encountered this before. You definitely have to shecht a bird. The question is it the Rabbanan or is it the Raisa? So he's saying the one who says that ikor simanim is not an issue by a bird must be going according to the one who says it's only the Rabbanan. Why? Because if it's only the Rabbanan, so we're meko, and therefore we let him shecht even if the jaw is disconnected. But according to the one who says that the shchita of an oath, that the fact that you have to do shchita by a bird altogether, yesh ikor, you definitely would have a halacha, just because since it's midaraisa, it's chamor, and just like by a behema you can't have the disconnection from the jaw, so too by a bird you can't have the disconnection in the jaw. So this was Rav Acha Brei the Rava was saying to Rav Ashi, to which Rav Ashi responded, Amrlei, he said to him, Adarabba, I'll tell you exactly the opposite. Ifcha mistabra, the opposite makes sense. Liman da'amar yesh shchita lof minat Torah ikol meimer dahachi agmar dein ikor. So he says as follows: if you're going to tell me that shchita of a bird is midaraisa, it's written in the Torah, it's known from the Torah, so then just like I learn from, it's going to be a halacha lo moshe misin. Just like I learned that by shchita of an animal, not just like I learned by an animal that if the jaw is disconnected, that's a problem in the shchita, but by shchita of birds, which is also minat Torah, it does not, ikor is not a problem, because then I have a basis. What's the basis? That the same Torah that told me that ikor is a problem by behema is telling me halacha l'moshe misinai that it's not a problem by ophos. He says, and even if you're coming to tell me, so this is something that we're going to learn in Mitzvah Hashem next week, but we've referenced it before, that we learned the Hekish. The pasuk says, Zos Torahs ha-behema va'of. This is the Torah of behema and oaf, comes to tell you that behema and oaf have the same halacha. So I would say, just like by behema you need shchita, so too by an oaf you need shchita. So that would seem to tell you that if you're basing it on the Hekish, that just like by behema you can't have ikor, so too by a bird you can't have ikor. But the Gemara is saying, no, it doesn't have to be that way, as Rashi explains, because even a Hekish, when can you make a Hekish? Only if you learned that in the Masorah, which came down from Moshe Rabbeinu. So the same Moshe Rabbeinu that told you that there's a Hekish between behema and oaf, told you by behema you have a halacha of ikor, by oaf you would not have a halacha by ikor. So if you understand, says Rashi, that shchitas ha'of is minat Torah, so then the same Torah that told you have a problem of disconnected jaw by behema is telling you by bird you don't have it. But if you're going to tell me that shchita is not minat Torah and shchita of a bird is only d'Rabbanan, where do you learn out? In other words, if you're saying we the Rabbanan are coming up with a concept of shechita by a bird, which does not exist in the Torah, so where would you pick up the halachas of shechita? Obviously from a behema. So mehechik mirlam behema kula milsa behema. So if the Rabbanan are coming up with a new concept of shechita of a bird, what are they going to base it on? They're going to base it on the halachas of an animal. But one of the halachas by an animal is that ikor, the disconnection from the jaw, is a problem. So therefore, you would have it also on a bird. So says Rav Ashi that that when Rami Bar Yecheskel says that ikor simanim is not an issue by birds, it has to be talking according to the opinion that shechita of an oaf is minat Torah, because the same Torah that told you there is by a behema told you there isn't by an oaf, but it would be the Rabbanon, you would not be able to make a distinction between behema and oaf. Okay, Amr Ravina says, Amr li Ravin Bar Kisi. Ravin Bar Kisi said to me, Hadetani Rami Bar Yecheskel ein ikor simanim ba'of, lo amrin el b'malika av b'shechita yesh ikor. Okay, so he says that when Rami Bar Yecheskel said there's no ikor simanim ba'of, it was coming to tell you a unique halacha of Malika, but not shechita, right? So in other words, we understood before, and in fact, if you remember the sequence of the Gemara, because it's going to come up in a second, that Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Shmuel, there's something that's puzzle by shechita is going to be puzzle by Malika. We said maybe just like ikor simanim is a psul by that it's a psul by shechita, it's going to be also a psul by Malika. To which the Gemara responded, no, because Rabbi Bar Yecheskel says that there's no halakha at all by birds, not by Malika, not by shechita, right? So now Ravina is going to bring Rabbi Bar Kisi, he's going to say something different. He's going to say as follows, that you assume that when Rabbi Bar Yecheskel said ein ikor ba'ov, that you don't have a concept of a disconnected jaw being a psul by birds, that was true both for shechita and Malika. Says Ravina in the name of Ravin Bar Kisi, that no, that's a unique halacha by Malika, that a disconnected jaw is not a problem. So therefore, according to this understanding, a disconnected jaw is a problem by behema. A disconnected jaw is a problem by shechita of a bird. Where is a disconnected jaw not a problem? It's a unique halacha of Malika, that by Malika you wouldn't have it. So the Gemara says, but we had this Gemara that I just referenced, that Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Shmuel on Amud Aleph, that which is kasher by shechita, that the oref in the same place is kasher by Malika. Ha puzzle. But if something will be puzzle by shechita, it will be puzzle by Malika too. So you see that the way we understood on Amud Aleph is that. So the way we're now understanding is as follows: that they're arguing in Rami Bar Yecheskel. Did Rami Bar Yecheskel say his halacha by Malika or by Malika and shechita of an oaf? And so clearly, according to everyone, Malika does not have a halacha of ikor simanim. And Ravin Bar Kisi is saying that's the end of the permit. In other words, there's no problem of a disconnected jaw by Malika, but there would be a problem of a disconnected jaw by shechita. But the problem is that Yirmiyah in the name of Shmuel gave a parallel. It said that which is puzzle in shechita is puzzle in Malika, and that which is kasher in shechita is kasher in Malika. So he's saying there's a linkage. The way Shmuel, the Rabbi Yirmiyah says in the name of Shmuel, there's a linkage between shechita and Malika. That which is kasher by one is kasher by the other. That which is puzzle by one is puzzle by the other. So therefore, according to him, if everyone agrees that it's kasher by Malika, that the disconnected jaw is not a problem by Malika, so according to Rabbi Yirmiyah in the name of Shmuel, that those should be linked concepts, and therefore, just like it is kasher by Malika to have a disconnected jaw, it should be kasher by shechita of an oaf. So the Gemara says, Ahu pliga. He says, you're right, that Rabbi Yirmiyah in the name of Shmuel understands there to be a linkage, and therefore, just like Rami Bar Yecheskel says that there's no halacha of a disconnected jaw being a problem by Malika, there's no problem by shechita of a bird, whereas Ravin Bar Kisi would say, no, I disagree, that when Rami Bar Yecheskel said his halacha of ein ikor ba'ov, that there's no problem with a disconnected jaw, that was a unique halacha to Malika, and Malika and shechita are not necessarily linked, and therefore by shechita of a bird, a disconnected jaw would be a problem, just like it is a problem by a full-fledged behema. Okay, Amr Zeiri. Zeiri said as follows, somewhat new halacha, Nishbra mafrekes v'roiv basar ima nevela. So he says as follows, that if the neck bone and most of the basar, the meat that's with it, is broken, that's nevela. Okay, so now it just bears repeating, as we've learned many times. The difference, treifa and nevela, they both make a behema. You're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to eat a behema that was shechted as a treifa, and if it was not shechted properly, it's nevela. You can't eat either of them. But what's the major difference between them? That if something was nevela, then it is metame. It causes tumah. Whereas a treifa, the way a treifa works is, even if you have a behemoth that's a treifa that can't be eaten, but if you do shchita to that treifa, so now that shchita protects it from being nevela, because by definition, nevela is something that did not have proper shchita. Okay? So, the halacha Zeiri is saying is as follows, that when you break the neck and most of the meat that's with it, that is a case of nevela. Amr Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda asked the question, Afana nami tania. We also learned this already in the Mishnah. Why are you telling this to me? I already know it. Why? Because it says, Malak besakin mitame begadim abeis abliya. So he says as follows, that if you do Malika with a knife, that you're mitame clothing when it's in the neck. Okay, so what is this talking about? So first of all, Malika, as we know, is with a fingernail, not with a knife. So if someone they had a bird in the base of Mikdash that they needed to do Malika, and instead they used a knife, that causes tumah in the clothing when it's in the throat. What is that a reference to? So ordinarily, by a nevela of a regular animal, that's a kosher animal, so it is mitame b'maga b'masa. If you touch it, or if you indirectly carry it, then that makes the person tame. A of tahar, a kosher bird, which obviously if you're bringing as a carbon in the base of Mikdash, is a kosher bird. A kosher bird, the halacha is different. If you touch it when it's in nevela, you're not tame. The only way you're tame is when you swallow it and it's in the throat. So the Torah tells us that at that point, the clothing you're wearing becomes tame. Not only does the clothing you're wearing become tame, but it has this nevela of a bird is a rishon l'tumah, and the clothing becomes a rishon l'tumah. Not only that, anything you touch while the bird is in your throat also becomes a rishon l'tumah if you touch a keli, right? And then once you finish swallowing, it's down in your stomach, now it's no longer metame. So the clothes you were wearing became tame, but anything you would touch at this point would not become tame. So what are we saying? We're saying that the Mishnah tells us that if you do malika with a knife, when you're supposed to do it with your fingernail, it is a case of nevela, because that's what it means when it says it's metame, the clothing you're wearing, when it's in your throat. So now the Gemara says, V'iyam retrefa havai malikasa zui shchitasa. He says, so, and what do you see from there? You see that this it must be that when you break the neck of a bird before you shech the trachea or the esophagus, it has to be that's more than a treifa. It has to be that makes an avela. Why? Because if it was only a treifa, then what would happen is when I take the knife and I cut the back of the bird's neck, so what's the first thing that happens? Is I break the neck. If breaking the neck just becomes a treifa, when I then continue the shchita by cutting the trachea and the esophagus, or actually a rove of one of them, so then what's going to happen? At that point, the shchita is happening on a treifa. Shchita on a treifa, we said before, is not nevela, because shchita protects it from nevela. So says the Gemara, that if I say that breaking the neck is only a treifa, then the malika should be its form of shchita, and therefore the malika, when it goes through the trachea and esophagus, would now take that status of treifa, have shchita, and it can now no longer become nevela. But from the fact that it said to us that the Mishnah said that when you do malika with a sakin, you actually cause tumah of nevela, it goes to show you that when you break a neck, that creates nevela. It's not just treifa, it's actually nevela. So the Gemara is asking, you told me this halacha zeiri that breaking the neck and most of its meat make something a nevela. I already know it from the Mishnah that tells us that when you do malika with a knife, that you're creating the tumah of nevela. So So the Gemara says, Amri Hasam Mishum Delav Shchita Hi Klal. So he says as follows, that he says, why did Zeiri need to tell me this halacha, even though I learned it already by when you do Malika with a sakin? He says, because he says as follows, that when the Mishnah says you do Malika with a sakin, maybe it's not because breaking the neck is a nevela, maybe it's only a treifa, but why over there is a metame, the begadim, is because that's not even any form of shchita. So we were assuming that when you do Malika with the knife, once you get through the back of the neck, you're then completing the shchita. He's saying, no, that isn't shchita at all when you go through the back of the neck. And so maybe only there is it considered nevela, because cutting the back of a neck with a knife is not even shchita at all. But maybe I would think that normally breaking the neck is only a treifa, not a nevela. So that's why Zeiri needed to say it. Now the Gemara wants to know, why are you going to tell me that cutting a bird through the back of the neck is not even a form of shchita? Why not? So the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? Rav Hoonah says, mipneshu machlid, because he's doing chalada. Now normally chalada is the idea that we've talked about, where you kind of bury the knife behind the trachea and the esophagus and you cut through. A different form of chalada here, but the idea is that the knife gets hidden. It gets stuck behind something. So the idea here is that when you cut through the back of the neck, that unlike the trachea and esophagus, which we discussed, as you cut it, it expands, right? So you're seeing the knife. Then in this case, the knife goes right through the neck bones. The neck is still held in place by muscle or whatever it is, and therefore the knife disappears in a certain sense into the animal. So that's a problem of chalada, so it's not even any form of shchita. That's Rav Hoonah's opinion. Rav says dores, because when you cut through the back of the neck and you go straight down in a bird, that you're doing drisa, that you're doing pressure with a knife. You're not doing the molech umevi. And that's why this is not even any form of shchita. So now we're just trying to figure out, why is it not form of shchita? The fact that it's not form of shchita was the answer of why Zeiri needed to tell us his special halacha. Now the Gemara is still going to focus on this machlokas between Rav Hoonah and Rava. He says, according to Rav Hoonah, who said that the reason this isn't even any form of shchita is because the knife gets buried in the neck. My tamer lama p'nei dores. Why he have a problem that say it's not shchita because you're not doing molech umevi? So he says, kasavar molech umevi Malika kosher, because Rav Hoonah is one of those who says that going back and forth by Malika is kosher. So it can't be that you're telling me doing a Malika with a knife is a problem, that it's not shchita at all because you can't go back and forth. Rav Hoonah is of the you can go back and forth. Now this, by the way, is the machlokas that we referenced on Amud Aleph of whether back and forth works by Malika or not. By Malika or not. So Rav Hoonah says it does. And according to the one who says that it's a problem of drisa, that it's going right in and there's no back and forth, obviously he holds that you cannot do drisa, you cannot do back and forth motion by Malika, you have to go straight in. So why my time machlid? What was his problem? Why did he have a problem with saying that when you go into the neck of a bird, it's chalada because a knife disappears? Amarlach, he said to you, chalada hechidami. How do you have chalada? Kechulda hadara beikre batim de mechasya. So he says, because what is chalada? Chalada is like a chulda, some kind of a weasel. Okay, it's a weasel that lives beneath the structure of a house, meaning that it lives somewhere that's covered. So chalada means something that's totally covered. Hacha hamegalia. He says, while I agree that it doesn't spread open like a trachea and esophagus, but at the end of the day, when you cut into the back of the neck of the animal, you could still see the knife. So he says chalada doesn't work like that. But in any event, so we kind of got on a tangent here to understand why it wasn't shchita. But Zeiri said a halacha that breaking the neck creates nevela. We said, why don't I know it from the Mishnah that says Malika with a sakin is metama beis abliya? We said I might have thought that's different, because I would have thought that case is not shchita at all. But where you have shchita that breaks the neck, maybe it's only treifa and it's not nevela. So Amar Rava. So Rava says, so it's no kasha why Zeiri needed to say that halacha. But ikashali hakashali. But I have a different problem with Zeiri's halacha. If Zeiri is right that when you break the neck of an animal, that creates nevela, he says v'chi mesa omedu molech. He's saying anytime you do malika, how do you do malika? You break the neck, you get through the neck, and then you do the trachea and esophagus. So he's saying if breaking a neck it makes something a nevela, so he says, and every time you do Malika, by the time you get to the trachea and esophagus, the animal's dead already because it already had. I'm sorry. You already broke the neck and the spinal cord. So how do you ever do Malika? Abaye says, well, what kind of question is that? So he said, but wait a second. We know the halacha is by ola sa'ov. So we know that there's chata sa'ov and ola sa'ov. Chata sa'ov is the one that you're supposed to cut one of the trachea or the esophagus, and in fact the Torah says lo yavdil, that you should not separate it, meaning you should not cut both. And by ola sa'ov, though, you need to cut both. You need to cut both the trachea and the esophagus of the bird. So now the Gemara's question is, you're telling me that you have a problem if you break the neck, that is killing the animal. So he said, but wait a second, when you're dealing with a bird, everyone would agree that when you cut one of the trachea or the esophagus, that the bird is dead, and yet by ola sa'ov, you need to go through the second one, so you can ask the same question. You're doing shchita on a dead bird. So the Gemara says, so why are you bothering me about Malika? It's true every time you have an ola sa'ov. So the Gemara says, no. The reason by ola sa'ov you have to cut through both simanim, even though after the first one the animal's dead, is not because you're doing shchita. Shchita ends when the animal's dead. But rather, why are you doing it in that case? Because the Torah told us by ola sa'ov, you have to do avdallah. You have to separate the head and the body, which we understand to mean going through both simanim. So when you're going through the second siman, it's true that the animal's dead, but the reason you're going through the second siman is in order to be mekayim havdalah. So the Gemara says, Ihachi, so if you're coming to tell me that by ola sa'ov you have to cut all the way through, Ihachi or nami, so he says, then you should have to cut through the skin of the bird also, meaning you have to go all the way through. So why don't you only have to go through the two simanim. So why are you telling me that there's a special halacha by Avdallah? So he says no, because kol ha'ma'akev b'shchita ma'akev ba'avdallah. He says as follows, that he says no, because something that is a problem in shchita is a problem in Avdallah. Something that's that's not a problem in shchita is not a problem by Avdallah. So therefore, by shchita, there's no halacha that you have to cut through the skin of the animal, so that's not required for Avdallah. But there is a halacha that you have to come through the kana or the veshet. Once you have the kana or the veshet, so for Avdallah, you have to cut through both of them. So the Gemara says, wait a second, if you're telling me that anything that's a requirement of shchita is a requirement of Avdallah, and anything that's not a requirement of shchita is not a requirement of Avdallah, he says, but wait a second, the Rabbanan hold by shchita, you only have to go through rov of the siman, or the simanim. You don't have to go through the entire thing. But yet by Havdalah, you have to go through the entire, both the trachea and the esophagus. So if you're telling me that anything that applies by shchita applies by Havdalah, and anything that doesn't apply by shchita doesn't apply by Havdalah, by shchita you don't have to go all the way through the simanim, but by Havdalah you do have to go all the way through the simanim. So the Gemara says, so he says, no, it's not saying that all the halachas of shchita apply by Havdalah and all the halachas of Havdalah and vice versa. He's saying, but any concept that exists by shchita exists by Havdalah, and a concept that does not exist by shchita does not exist by Havdalah. Therefore, the concept of cutting through the trachea and esophagus exists by shchita, and therefore by Havdalah you have to cut through the trachea and esophagus. The concept of cutting the skin does not exist by shchita, and therefore it does not exist by Havdalah. So now all we've done at this point, we had a question. The question was, every time you're doing Malika, if breaking the neck makes it into a nevela, then what, by the time you get up to the trachea and esophagus, you are dealing with a dead bird. So we wanted to say Ola Sa'of is a question. We say Ola Sa'of is not a question, because Ola Sa'of, the reason you're going all the way through is for Havdalah, for separating the head, not for the halacha of shchita. So I'm still stuck with the question. Every time I'm doing Malika, according to Zeiri, I'm doing Malika on a dead bird. So the Gemara says, "Mikol makom kasha." So we're left with the kasha on Zeiri. So the Gemara says, "Amarava ema v'chein hu oseh." So Rava says, actually Rava's the one who's asking this question. Rava answers it himself. He says, "You guys, you're getting caught up with Zeiri saying if you break the neck, it's an avela, but you missed a different part of what Zeiri said. What has Zeiri said? Zeiri said that if you break the neck and rove of the basar and the majority of the meat, that makes an avela. So he says, rather, what should you do? Chotech sedra umafrekes, that you should cut the the spine and the neck below rov basar, without the majority of the meat. So then you're avoiding it becoming an avela. So the question was, how do you ever have a proper malika? The answer is you have to do malika. You got to go in and you got to cut through the neck and the spinal cord and the trachea or the esophagus as appropriate. And only then do you finish the cut where you cut rov basar that's around it. So it says, Kisal Reb Zera Ashkechol Rabami Diyasav Kamerla Hashmaita. When Reb Zera came up, he found Rabami talking about this exact conversation. Amalei, he said to him, V'chimesa Omed Molech. Same question that they asked, are you, every time you do Malika, are you doing Malika on a dead bird? Eshtomim. So he was quiet. Rabami was quiet for a minute as he thought about it. Eshtomim Keshachada. He was quiet for a moment. So Amalei, Reb Zera jumped in and said to him, Ema Kachu Oisa, I'll give you an answer. What's the reason why every time you're doing Malika, you're not doing it on a dead bird? Is because how do you do Malika? Chotek Sedra Mafrekas below rov basar. That what you do is you inject in and you break the neck without rov basar. Then you do the kaner veshet, the simanim, and only later do you finish rov basar. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned that way in the Brisa also. Ketzad Mokin Chatas Of. How do you do Malika on a Chatas Of? Chotek Sedra Mafrekas below rov basar. That you cut the spine and the neck without rov basar achamagil leveshet olakana until you actually get the trachea or the esophagus. Higil leveshet olakana chotek siman echad or rubo v'rov basar imo. So only once you've cut the trachea or the esophagus, or at least the majority of one of them, only then do you do rov basar u'ba'ola. When we're talking about an ola when you need to do both the trachea and the esophagus, shnaim or rov shnaim. So what you do is you inject the fingernail, you sever the spine and the neck bone, then you do either one or both of the trachea and esophagus, and only subsequently do you cut rov basar, and at that point that you've already done shchita, so it doesn't become nevela. But enochinami, if you would do malika in a way that you cut the neck and rov basar before you cut the trachea and esophagus, then in fact what you're doing is by the time you get up to the trachea and esophagus, you're shechting a dead bird. They say that's one of the hard things of being a kohen is doing that.